Imagine a father so ruthless he'd rather destroy his own son's happiness than lose his criminal throne. In 1970s Pennsylvania, Bruce Johnston ruled a gang famous for stealing hundreds of Corvettes and John Deere tractors across state lines. But when his own teenage son fell in love with a sharp, outspoken 15-year-old girl, Bruce Johnston saw her as the ultimate threat to everything he'd built. What started as a father trying to protect his family business soon spiraled into one of the most shocking betrayals in true crime history. You see, the Johnston gang wasn't built off honest work or long hours punching a clock. Nah, these dudes built their entire empire off stealing, hustling, and straight up terrorizing people for nearly 2 decades. Back in the 1960s and 70s, they started making noise around Chester County, Pennsylvania, but before long, their crime spilled across multiple states. At one point, the crew had such a grip on the streets that people believed they were responsible for most of the major crime happening in the entire region. These guys were stealing tractors at such a crazy rate that Chester County reportedly had more tractor thefts than the rest of the country combined. But they weren't stopping there. Corvettes, expensive farm equipment, high-value machinery. If it could make money, the Johnstons wanted it. Reports say they stole more than 200 Corvettes alone. Once they got their hands on the goods, the gang moved everything through a massive network of fences who flipped the stolen property across the region, including through a huge flea market down in Cowtown, New Jersey. But what really showed how grimy and fearless they were was what happened after the sales. The Johnstons would sometimes circle back and steal the same tractors all over again from the people who bought them, and the buyers couldn't exactly call the cops crying about stolen property getting stolen. As the years rolled on, the gang became more dangerous, more violent, and way more organized. These weren't reckless stick-up boys moving off impulse. The Johnston crew studied everything. They ran surveillance, posted lookouts, and planned jobs carefully before making a move. That attention to detail helped them pull off some massive robberies, including hitting the world-famous Longwood Gardens on the DuPont estate, along with countless homes and businesses. The wild part was how long they kept getting away with it. In a small-town environment where everybody knew everybody, fear kept mouths shut. Folks understood exactly what could happen if somebody talked. At the center of it all stood Bruce Johnston. On the surface, he came across calm and polite, but behind those cold eyes was somebody people genuinely feared. Right beside him were his brothers David and Norman, the men helping run the operation. The Johnston family came out of the mushroom-growing countryside around Kennett Square, Pennsylvania, carrying deep Appalachian roots from eastern Tennessee. Life coming up wasn't pretty. Broken homes, no fathers around, school getting dropped early, all of it helped shape the road they eventually went down. Before long, Bruce and his brothers became addicted to fast money, flashy cars, and easy living, and the wealthy farming communities around Chester County basically became their personal shopping mall. Locals even separated the family into 2 categories. Bruce, David, and Norman became known as the Bad Johnston brothers, while 3 of their other brothers earned the label of the Good Johnstons. One local garage owner from Chadds Ford summed them up perfectly. Everybody knew the brothers looked sharp, drove fancy cars, carried big rolls of cash, and somehow never seemed interested in honest work a single day in their lives. Another family friend described Bruce as a man who carried himself with old-school principles. He didn't drink much, didn't curse much, and took pride in keeping his word. But crossing him, that was a different story entirely. Things got even crazier once Bruce Sr.'s estranged sons, Bruce Jr. and James Jimmy Johnstone, suddenly re-entered his life. Instead of rebuilding a normal father-son relationship, the whole thing turned into a criminal apprenticeship. The boys eventually formed their own little crew that people started calling the Kitty Gang. Bruce Sr. didn't discourage it either. In fact, he pushed them deeper into the life. He encouraged the boys to recruit friends, promising to teach them everything: how to steal, crack codes, move stolen goods, all of it. But there was always a catch with Bruce Sr. The profits had to be split with him and his crew, and somehow he always ended up taking the biggest piece. What made the whole thing even darker was the fact Bruce Jr. and Jimmy barely knew their father growing up. Their parents had divorced years earlier, and the boys were raised mostly by their mother and stepfather. To them, Bruce Sr. was more rumor than reality, a mysterious figure with a dangerous reputation floating around town. By the time Bruce Jr. turned 19 and Jimmy hit 18, both brothers were completely lost. No direction, no real goals, no guidance. Then one day, they decided to finally reach out to their father. That meeting changed everything. The moment the boys stepped into Bruce Sr.'s world, they were mesmerized. The man moved through town like a celebrity. He walked into bars where everybody knew his name. Cash flowed nonstop. Drinks for everybody. Expensive jewelry hanging off him. Sharp clothes, nice shoes, flashy cars sitting outside. Every time he opened his wallet, it looked stuffed to the point it could barely close. To two young men searching for purpose, Bruce Sr. looked like the blueprint for success. But Bruce Sr. trusted nobody, not even his own sons. At first, he lied to them, pretending all his money came from legitimate business. Then came the tests, loyalty tests, silence tests. Bruce needed to know if the boys would fold under pressure or keep their mouths shut if law enforcement came around asking questions. Eventually, the brothers proved themselves, and once Bruce Sr. believed they were loyal enough, he finally brought them into what he called the family business. The reason the Johnston gang survived so long came down to one brutal strategy: witness intimidation. If somebody even looked suspicious, the threat started immediately. Late-night phone calls at 3 a.m. warning people to stay quiet. And if fear alone didn't work, things escalated fast. Pipe bombs, bullets fired into vehicles, violent warnings sent directly to families. The gang made sure everybody understood the consequences of talking, and the strategy worked. Investigators thought they finally had enough evidence to bring the crew down, only for witnesses to suddenly disappear, backtrack, or refuse to cooperate. A few gang members did short stints behind bars, but most of the time, it barely slowed anything down. The moment they got released, they jumped right back into the streets like nothing ever happened. But eventually, the violence surrounding the gang crossed a line authorities couldn't ignore anymore. After police officers monitoring the crew were murdered, law enforcement decided the Johnston operation had to be crushed once and for all. Surveillance on Bruce Sr., his brothers, and everybody tied to the gang intensified heavily. Investigators finally realized traditional cases weren't enough. Witnesses were too scared. Informants kept folding. So the police came up with a new strategy: watch the crew nonstop and catch them committing crimes firsthand. By the late 1970s, the walls were finally starting to close in on Bruce Sr. and the Johnston crew. The pressure was building from every direction, and believe it or not, one of the biggest threats to the entire operation wasn't the cops, rival criminals, or undercover investigators. It was love. See, the Kitty Gang had actually started making serious money after stumbling through a rough beginning. Bruce Jr. and the younger crew were bringing in plenty of cash for Bruce Sr., and for a while, everything looked smooth. But then, Bruce Jr. fell hard for a local girl named Robin Miller, and suddenly things got complicated. Robin was only 15 years old at the time, living with her mother on a nearby farm. Everybody who knew her described her the same way: smart, outspoken, sharp-minded, and not scared to say exactly what was on her mind. She was popular around school, easy to talk to, and carried herself with a confidence that naturally pulled people toward her. Bruce Jr. was completely hooked. Now, yeah, there was an age gap since Bruce Jr. was already 19 and they came from totally different worlds, but the relationship seemed real. Bruce Jr. started spoiling her too. Gold necklaces, expensive gifts, flashy little presents that didn't exactly match the paycheck of an unemployed teenager. Robin's mother immediately started asking questions, wondering where all this expensive jewelry was suddenly coming from. Robin covered for him, of course, but deep down, she never fully accepted the life he was involved in. She'd heard all the stories floating around Chester County about the Johnston gang. Everybody had. She knew the family carried a dangerous reputation. Still, Bruce Jr. defended his father constantly, trying to convince her that Bruce Sr. wasn't the monster people made him out to be. But the reality was way more complicated than that. See, Bruce Sr. didn't survive all those years just because people feared him. He also knew how to make himself useful to the community. A lot of locals stayed quiet not only because they were scared, but because they benefited from the gang too. Bruce Sr. played that small-town Robin Hood role perfectly. He loaned money to struggling people, sold stolen equipment dirt cheap. Sometimes he'd even cut ridiculous deals on tractors just to keep folks loyal and grateful. The whole thing created this twisted system where people looked the other way because they were either profiting from it or owed him favors. That's why the moment Bruce Sr. met Robin Miller, alarm bells started going off in his head immediately. From day one, he saw her as a threat. She talked too much for his liking. She was intelligent, observant, and way too curious. And worst of all, Bruce Sr. could see just how deeply his son cared about her. In his mind, that combination was dangerous. If Bruce Jr. got too comfortable and started sharing family secrets, or if Robin ever spoke to the wrong person, the entire criminal operation could come crashing down. Bruce Sr. wasn't about to let that happen. At the same time, Robin was doing everything she could to pull Bruce Jr. away from the life. She wanted him to leave the kiddie gang behind and live normal. But Bruce Jr. was trapped between two worlds. On one side, there was Robin and the possibility of a real future. On the other side was the fast money, the expensive lifestyle, and his father's influence hanging over him like a shadow. And truthfully, Bruce Jr. loved the money. He loved the cars, the flashy dinners, the feeling of walking around with cash in his pocket. Walking away meant giving all that up and getting a regular job. Worse than that, it meant risking his father's anger. And everybody knew Bruce Sr. wasn't the type of man you disappointed lightly. Eventually, all that pressure started catching up to him. Bruce Jr. slipped up and got arrested for theft, landing himself in jail for a short stretch. Bruce Sr. exploded with anger, but interestingly, he didn't blame his son directly. Instead, he blamed Robin. In his eyes, she had become a distraction that was making Bruce Jr. careless and weak. People close to the family later claimed Bruce Sr. even started doubting whether his son was truly built for the family business anymore. At one point, he reportedly told Bruce Jr. he should just forget crime altogether and go get a regular 9-to-5 job. But Bruce Jr. ignored the advice completely. Before long, he ended up back inside the Chester County prison farm again after getting caught stealing $2 worth of gas from a local farmer. Then, after making bail, he got arrested again for stealing a pickup truck and was sent right back. By that point, Bruce Jr. was miserable. His plans of marrying Robin Miller suddenly felt far away, like his whole life had slammed into a wall. Still, he stayed loyal to the family code he'd been raised on. If you do the crime, you do the time. So when Bruce Jr. landed behind bars again in 1978, investigators thought this was finally it. They believed the pressure would crack him and bring the entire Johnston empire crashing down. To the cops, Bruce Jr. looked like the perfect weak link, but he stayed solid and refused to talk. Meanwhile, Robin and Bruce Jr. kept communicating through letters while he was locked up. And that made Bruce Sr. nervous, extremely nervous. He became paranoid about what Robin might be saying to his son, especially knowing law enforcement was likely reading every letter trying to squeeze information out of Bruce Jr. Bruce Sr. came up with a cruel plan designed to scare Robin out of Bruce Jr.'s life permanently. He offered to take her to visit Bruce Jr. in jail. Robin missed her boyfriend badly, and transportation to the prison wasn't easy for her, so she agreed immediately. But the moment Bruce Sr. and another man picked her up, the situation already felt wrong. At first, they acted normal, pretending they were really headed to see Bruce Jr. Then the drinking started. Bruce Sr. and the other man began drinking heavily and pushing Robin to drink with them too, encouraging her to keep going until the alcohol hit her hard. But there was never any prison visit planned. Instead, the two men attacked the terrified young girl before threatening her to stay away from Bruce Jr. altogether. The message was crystal clear. If she didn't disappear from their lives, things could get even worse. About a month after that horrifying attack, Robin finally gathered the courage to tell Bruce Jr. the truth. She sat down and wrote him a letter explaining everything that had happened to her. The moment Bruce Jr. read it, something inside him completely snapped. Up until then, he had stayed loyal to the Johnston family no matter what. He kept quiet, protected the operation, and followed the family code. But after learning what had been done to Robin, all that loyalty went out the window. He was disgusted, furious, and completely done defending his father and the rest of the crew. That letter became the turning point. Bruce Jr. decided he was finally ready to give investigators exactly what they'd been chasing for years: information on Bruce Sr., his uncles, and the entire Johnston criminal operation. At first, he tried getting the rest of the Kitty Gang to stand beside him. The plan was for all of them to testify together and expose the tractor theft ring from the inside. But when the pressure got real and it was actually time to show up, everybody folded. So Bruce Jr. walked into the federal grand jury alone. That testimony sent shockwaves through the Johnston organization. Almost immediately, subpoenas started flying out to other members of the Kitty Gang, and panic spread through the inner circle fast. Bruce Sr., David Johnston, Norman Johnston, and Richard Mitchell realized the walls were finally closing in around them, and in their minds, there was only one solution left. In August of 1978, that decision turned deadly. 3 members of the Kitty Gang, James Jimmy Johnston, Dwayne Lincoln, and Wayne Sampson, were targeted for execution. And the terrifying part was that Jimmy Johnston wasn't just another gang member, he was Bruce Sr.'s own son. Rumors had already started spreading that Jimmy, just like his half-brother Bruce Jr., might cooperate with authorities. On top of that, Jimmy had officially been subpoenaed to appear before a federal grand jury. The Johnston brothers became convinced the younger crew was about to bring the entire empire crashing down. So they made a ruthless decision. The Kitty Gang had to be wiped out before anyone could talk. On the night of August 15th, just hours before Jimmy was supposed to testify, Bruce Sr. tracked him down in Oxford, Pennsylvania. Instead of threatening him outright, he got inside the young man's head. He convinced Jimmy to skip the subpoena and promised to hide him from the federal agents until everything cooled off. Bruce Sr. fed him a whole story about needing help stealing a lawn tractor the following night. Afterward, he claimed Jimmy would be sent off to California until the grand jury pressure disappeared. Jimmy trusted him. Following the plan, Bruce Sr. brought Jimmy to a mobile home belonging to another gang associate named Leslie Dale and ordered Dale to keep the young man completely hidden until after his scheduled testimony. But the next day, Bruce Sr. spotted Jimmy and Dale casually driving around town in a truck. He exploded. Furious that Jimmy had been seen in public, Bruce Sr. handed Dale money and ordered him to get Jimmy locked down inside a motel room immediately until he returned later that night. While Jimmy sat hidden away inside that motel room, 2 other members of the Kitty Gang, Dwayne Lincoln and Wayne Sampson, were unknowingly walking straight into their own deaths. The Johnston crew approached them with what sounded like another normal tractor theft job. Nothing unusual, just another score. The 2 young men were told to wait at the home of the Johnson's sister, Mary Payne, until it was time to move. But while all 3 boys were scattered around Chester County waiting for the supposed heist to begin, something much darker was unfolding behind the scenes. Bruce Sr., David Johnston, Norman Johnston, and Richard Mitchell gathered together at James Griffin's apartment to finalize a murder plan. The goal was simple: eliminate every witness before the federal grand jury ever got the chance to hear them speak. David Johnston handed Mitchell money and ordered him to buy shovels and lime. After grabbing the supplies, Mitchell and another accomplice drove out to an isolated stretch of woods in southern Chester County, where they spent hours digging a massive grave deep into the ground. By the evening of August 16th, the trap was fully set. One by one, Jimmy Johnston, Dwayne Lincoln, and Wayne Sampson were brought to the home of the Johnston family's mother, Louise. Waiting there were Bruce Sr., David, Norman, and Richard Mitchell. To keep the boys calm, Bruce Sr. lied directly to their faces. He told them they needed help recovering a stolen lawn tractor stuck deep in the mud somewhere out in the woods. Once night fell, the boys were loaded into vehicles and driven out toward the gravesite. Then came the executions. The young men were led through the darkness one at a time. As each approached the edge of the freshly dug pit, they were shot in the head and dumped straight into the grave. Jimmy Johnston died first, killed by his own father. Bruce Sr. Dwayne Lincoln was executed next by David Johnston. Wayne Sampson was the last to die, shot by Richard Mitchell. Afterward, the killers buried the bodies, covered the grave, and disappeared into the night like nothing had happened. But the violence still wasn't over. Wayne Sampson's older brother, Jimmy Sampson, quickly realized something was wrong after Wayne suddenly vanished. He started pressing the Johnston brothers with hard questions and openly threatened them if they had harmed his little brother. That sealed his fate too. Not long afterward, Jimmy Sampson went out with members of the gang to a landfill in northern Chester County under the pretense of stealing another tractor. But according to later testimony from accomplice Ricky Mitchell, the entire thing was another setup. Out there at the landfill, Norman Johnston suddenly pulled out a gun and murdered Jimmy Sampson on the spot. To erase the evidence, his body was buried beneath piles of landfill trash. Meanwhile, Bruce Jr. was still actively cooperating with investigators. Authorities knew his life was in serious danger, so they transferred him out of Chester County Prison and moved him into Lancaster County for protection. By August 25, 1978, he was finally released on reduced bail. But behind the scenes, everything was still chaotic. Authorities desperately wanted Bruce Jr. placed into witness protection, but there was one massive problem. He refused to fully cooperate with the rules. And the biggest rule of all was staying away from Robin Miller. Bruce Jr. simply wouldn't do it. No matter how dangerous things became, he kept going back to her. Later on, Robin's mother even attempted legal action against law enforcement, arguing they failed to protect the teenagers properly. But legally, the whole situation became complicated because Bruce Jr. repeatedly ignored the safety restrictions investigators put in place. Truthfully, both Robin and Bruce Jr. were still incredibly young and naive. Because police surveillance around the Johnston gang had become so intense, the couple probably believed the authorities would keep them safe. In their minds, the cops were watching Bruce Sr. and the crew constantly, so maybe life could continue somewhat normally. But they badly underestimated the people they were dealing with. This wasn't some sloppy neighborhood crew operating off emotion and impulse. The Johnston gang had survived for years because they understood intimidation, manipulation, and violence better than almost anybody around them. They knew how to work around the law, they knew how to scare witnesses, and most importantly, they knew how to make problems disappear. Bruce Sr. might not always have been the one personally pulling the trigger himself, but in that world, money and fear could always find somebody willing to do the dirty work. At first, Bruce Sr. actually approached Bruce Jr. and offered him $12,000 just to take back the testimony he had already given to the federal grand jury. But while he was pretending to negotiate with his son on one side, he was secretly making moves behind the scenes on the other. At the exact same time, he reportedly placed a $15,000 bounty on Bruce Jr.'s head, and Bruce Sr. made his intentions crystal clear. In his mind, if one person started talking, the entire Johnston empire would collapse right behind them. That was all the motivation certain members of the crew needed. David Johnston, Norman Johnston, Leslie Dale, and Richard Mitchell all allegedly signed on to the plan. Soon, David and Norman began staking out the farmhouse where Bruce Jr. had been staying with Robin Miller, waiting patiently for the perfect chance to strike. Eventually, the crew settled on the night of August 30th, 1978. The plan was carefully designed. David Johnston and Norman would carry out the shooting themselves, while Bruce Sr. and Richard Mitchell intentionally placed themselves at a local cocktail lounge during the attack to build a solid alibi. That night, David and Norman hid out in a field across from Robin's rural farmhouse, waiting silently in the darkness. Meanwhile, Bruce Jr. and Robin were completely unaware of the danger creeping toward them. The young couple had just returned home from a date at Hershey Park, the famous amusement park connected to the Hershey chocolate factory. It was supposed to be a normal night. Two teenagers pulling back into the driveway after spending time together. As they reached into their Volkswagen Rabbit, everything exploded into chaos. Gunfire suddenly ripped through the quiet night. David Johnston and Norman rushed the car, unloading round after round directly into Bruce Jr. 9 bullets tore into him, striking his head, chest, torso, and arms. Even with devastating injuries, the two somehow managed to crawl out of the vehicle and stagger into the farmhouse. They collapsed inside Robin's bedroom, both bleeding heavily. Robin was fading fast. Bruce Jr., barely conscious and riddled with bullets, could do almost nothing except watch helplessly as the girl he loved slowly slipped away beside him. By the time emergency responders arrived, it was already too late for Robin Miller. She was only 15 years old. Doctors rushed Bruce Jr. into emergency surgery and fought desperately to keep him alive. And as horrifying as the shooting already was, investigators later learned the Johnston crew allegedly tried to sneak into the hospital afterward to finish the job completely. The goal was simple: leave no witnesses alive. But somehow, against impossible odds, Bruce Jr. survived, and his survival stunned everybody, especially Bruce Sr. and the rest of the gang. Later reports describing his condition painted an almost unbelievable picture. His face had been destroyed so badly it was barely recognizable, yet incredibly, his skull remained intact. Investigators eventually discovered the gun used in the attack had been stolen from a truck and loaded with flat-nosed target bullets instead of ammunition designed to kill efficiently. Authorities also determined Robin and Bruce Jr. had been struck by different weapons, confirming there were at least 2 shooters involved in the ambush. As Pennsylvania State Police, Chester County detectives, FBI agents, and emergency crews flooded the farmhouse outside Oxford in the early morning hours of August 30th, investigators already understood exactly why Bruce Jr. had been targeted. He broke the family code. Inside the Johnston organization, cooperating with law enforcement was considered the ultimate betrayal. And in that world, betrayal carried only one punishment: death. Robin Miller's murder changed everything. Investigators suspected the Johnston gang had ties to missing people and violent crimes, but they had never uncovered bodies or enough hard evidence to fully crack the organization open. The shooting instantly turned the pressure up to maximum levels. Just 2 weeks later, authorities moved Bruce Jr. into extreme protective custody. And once he survived and kept talking, the Johnston empire finally started to crumble piece by piece. Leslie Dale, Richard Mitchell, and several other associates were arrested for their involvement in the criminal syndicate. One after another, many of them flipped and agreed to cooperate with prosecutors. What shocked investigators most was how much violence had remained hidden all those years. Before Robin Miller's murder, police reportedly had no concrete idea how many killings were connected to the gang. Sure, plenty of Johnston associates had mysteriously vanished over time, but nobody could prove what happened to them. That changed once witnesses started talking. Over the next several months, authorities slowly built their case against the Johnston brothers, working aggressively to turn insiders against one another. One of the biggest breakthroughs came through Leslie Dale. Prosecutors pressured him using an entirely separate murder investigation involving a young man from Coatesville. Dale and another criminal named Richard Donnell had allegedly been using Jackie's driver's license to cash stolen checks. But once they became paranoid, Jackie might expose the operation. Investigators said the pair lured him to the Brandywine River near a place called McCorkle's Rock. There, Jackie was pistol whipped, forced underwater, and drowned. For years, that murder case went nowhere. Then, during the massive Johnston investigation, detectives reopened it and uncovered brand new evidence after re-examining Jackie Bain's remains in a cemetery on a foggy November morning. Armed with that evidence, prosecutors approached Richard Donnell, who was already sitting in federal prison on stolen property charges. They offered him a deal: testify against Leslie Dale and avoid additional prison time. Donnell took the deal. That pressure finally helped crack Dale too. At the same time, Richard Mitchell began cooperating with authorities and led investigators directly to the graves of Jimmy Johnston, Dwayne Lincoln, and Wayne Sampson. The only body never recovered was Jimmy Sampson, whose remains were believed to still be buried somewhere beneath landfill trash. Meanwhile, Bruce Johnston Sr. finally got arrested near Reading, Pennsylvania. And strangely enough, after years of evading authorities during a massive criminal empire, the arrest reportedly stemmed from something incredibly small: the theft of an $8 tape cartridge from a store. By then, though, investigators were already stacking major federal and state charges against him, including conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and multiple murders. Then came January 29, 1979. That was the day prosecutors officially hit David and Norman Johnston with 5 counts of murder, along with conspiracy charges, attempted murder, aggravated assault, and weapons offenses. Bruce Johnston Sr. was hit with nearly identical charges the very same day, plus an additional murder count connected to another victim. The trials that followed painted a horrifying picture of the Johnston organization. By March 18, 1980, juries returned guilty verdicts against the Johnston brothers on multiple murder charges and virtually every connected offense prosecutors brought against them. But the most dramatic courtroom moment came later that year during Bruce Sr.'s trial. In November 1980, after weeks of testimony, prosecutors and defense attorneys delivered their final arguments to the jury inside a packed Chester County courtroom. Special Prosecutor William H. Lamb described the Johnston operation as a criminal empire collapsing under pressure. According to prosecutors, once younger gang members started cooperating with police, Bruce Sr. panicked and decided witnesses had to die before the entire organization came crashing down. The prosecution portrayed Bruce Sr. as the mastermind behind everything: the organizer, the shot caller, the man who had the most to lose. And perhaps the hardest reality hanging over the courtroom was the human cost of it all. 6 young people were dead. The prosecution argued the Johnston operation wasn't truly a family at all, but a business built on crime, fear, and money, where loyalty mattered more than love, and anybody viewed as weak became disposable. The defense fought back aggressively, insisting the prosecution's story contained contradictions and unreliable testimony. But in the end, the jury wasn't convinced. On November 16th, Bruce Johnston Sr. stood silently in court as guilty verdicts were read out against him for the murders of multiple victims, including his own stepson, and for the attempted murder of Bruce Jr. The sentence that followed was crushing: 6 consecutive life sentences. Norman and David Johnston also received 4 consecutive life sentences, along with additional years stacked on top. Decades later, on August 5, 2002, Bruce Johnston Sr. was rushed to Mercy Suburban General Hospital, suffering complications from liver disease. He was returned to prison shortly afterward and died just 2 days later. But even after death, the story carried one final eerie twist. Bruce Sr. ended up buried in Fremont Union Cemetery in Nottingham, Chester County, the exact same cemetery where Robin Miller had been laid to rest years earlier. But the difference between their graves tells its own story. Robin's grave remains modest but cared for, with flowers still appearing there from time to time. Bruce Sr.'s burial site, meanwhile, was left completely unmarked. People have searched for it over the years, but there's nothing there identifying where one of Pennsylvania's most feared crime bosses was finally laid to rest. And maybe the craziest part of the whole Johnston saga is this: despite decades of thefts, millions of dollars flowing through the organization, and one of the biggest criminal operations Pennsylvania had ever seen, most of the gang's stolen money and missing property was never recovered.